Okay, today is Monday, and we're going to read Snowbound episode 3. And then once we're finished, we're going to do some of the vocabulary, and then you're going to answer the questions for episode 3 and episode 4. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We left off with our protagonist was thinking that if her sister didn't come, if she didn't get a telegraph from her sister May, who had gone and lived with a family and had become a nurse, had been able to go to nursing school, if she didn't get a telegraph from her or word that she was going to come get her and her sister B, that she would have to get on the orphan train. And we then read the nonfiction article Orphan Train. So let's just jump right in here and look at this vocabulary. So we have embrace, which means to hug, embrace. Infuriated, which is intensely angry, very angry. Insulate, which is to prevent heat from escaping, which is going to be important because they are in the snowstorm in New York, coming back from the telegraph office. And then ungainly, which is lacking grace or awkward, which you would be if you were trying to walk through that snowstorm. So, episode 3, telegraph lines. In episode 2, Katie, B, and Miss Kent stopped in a telegraph office where Miss Kent asked whether there had been a message from the girl's sister, May. The man in the office told them that all the telegraph lines would be down for days, and there are the telegraph lines. And they look like telephone poles, but they bring those messages through the telegraph, through using Morse code. Days? How many days? Longer than a week? I scrambled up from where I had been sitting. That's too long, I blurted out. May could never get here in time if she receives a telegram days from now. I'll be on a train to a new family by the time she arrives. Miss Kent seemed horrified that I had heard their conversation. You could try writing a letter, Mr. Brown suggested, looking helplessly from me back to Miss Kent. But I'm afraid it's quite possible that the Postal Service has been affected by the storm. Turning to Miss Kent, I shouted, How could you let this happen? How could you not have written to May and made arrangements long ago? I didn't care that I was shouting. At this point, I was infuriated. And so that's intensely, intensely angry. You should have contacted May before the winter or sent someone to Boston to tell her to come and get us. Katie, control yourself, Miss Kent said. I've had enough of control, and I'm going to say how I feel. I told her, You should have done something, but you did nothing, and you've utterly ruined my life and Bee's life, too. Miss Kent looked over at something in the corner, and following her gaze, I saw that it was Bee. My little sister was sobbing, her face concealed by the collar of her coat. I sighed, kneeled down, and embraced or hugged her. I tried, Katie, Miss Kent explained, her voice just above a whisper, almost as if she was trying not to cry. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to raise your hopes, but May wrote to us in the winter and told us she'd be here in the spring. I replied, asking if she could come earlier, as you would be turning 13 in March, but I never received another letter from her. I hugged Bee tighter as Mr. Brown cleared his throat. Now look, he said, the blizzard is getting worse. So you go back to the orphanage where you'll be nice and warm and safe, huh? There were footsteps overhead, and then a woman came downstairs to join us. Hello, Miss Brown, said Miss Kent, hastily dabbing her cheeks with a handkerchief. Maybe she was crying. I heard some of your conversation. We live right upstairs, you see. You never know. Miss Fowler may be on the train to New York this very moment, although, oh dear, I suppose the trains have stopped running too. Turning to her husband, she said, Robert, I think we should let them stay here until the storm is over, don't you? No, we couldn't do that, Miss Kent said before Mr. Brown could respond. Miss Snippen will be worried about us, and with the lines down, it's impossible to telephone her and tell her we're all right. Miss Brown gave us a couple of old shawls to insulate our threadbare coats, and we stepped out into the storm just in time to see an empty delivery wagon a few doors down. The driver seemed to be unhitching his horse. Miss Kent tried to run toward him, but the snow was too deep to move quickly. Sir, she called, even though the driver couldn't have been older than me. Could we have a ride to the orphanage, please? Sorry, ma'am, but I'm leaving my wagon here and just taking the horse back to the stable so she'll have some shelter from all of this, he yelled back over the howling wind. You won't find any cabs either. The streets are impassable. We began walking, our steps purposeful but ungainly, until once again Bee stopped after progressing only a few feet. Look at that, she cried, gazing upwards. An elevated train was stopped on the tracks, its passengers exiting the cars. I nudged Bee to keep her moving and to keep her warm. But maybe May is on that train, she protested, still trying to look back at it. No, that's an elevated train. It's not the same as the train from Boston, I told her. It seems we'd be back at we'd be it seemed we had been back out in the storm for hours, but it probably had only been minutes. By now the snow was so deep that we trudged very slowly. Carry me, Katie, Bee pleaded with me. She knew she was much too big for me to pick her up, but the drifts were getting too high for her little legs. Just keep moving. We're almost. A web of telegraph, telephone, and electric lines suddenly spilled down into the street, dancing with sparks. The live wires spooked the horse, which the delivery boy had just ridden past us. The horse twisted and bucked, but the boy hung on somehow, and they disappeared into the curtain of snow. I realized then that I had no idea if we were headed in the right direction, as the falling snow was so dense that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And even worse, I didn't see Miss Kent. Okay, so you want to definitely do your activity now. So click on that. Click on the activity. And come down and split your screen. That is a big part of what we want to do. Okay, refer to the article. When you refer to the article, that's going to give you some important tips, okay, abilities. So you're going to come up here in your shadow box, your restore down box, and you're going to click on it, and that puts that at half the screen. And I'm going to move it over here where I have my questions taking up half the screen. And then when this comes up, it's going to be the article. So now I can easily refer back to the article. And so my question is, select the letter of the correct answer. What is the main problem in this episode? What's the conflict of the story? What's the main problem? And then Katie and Bee realize that the storm is making it impossible to find out if their sister is on her way to get them. Bee is having trouble walking in the snow because the drifts are getting very high, but Kate won't carry her. Now, that's a problem, but is that the main problem in this whole story, in this whole episode? Is that the main problem? Katie is yelling so loudly that Bee hears some of the conversation between Katie and Miss Kent. Again, that does happen. B here in that conversation is not the main point, right? B sees that the train has stopped on the tracks above them and thinks that May might be on it. So the main problem is usually, remember our plot diagram, right? So it starts out like this. And in this flat part, you're going to have in any story, even if it's one chapter or one episode of the story, usually you're going to say, okay, who's going to be in this chapter? Where is it set? This one is set in the telegraph office, and you have the telegraph operator and his wife and Miss Kent and our characters, Katie and Bee. That's who's going to be in this. And then you have the boy on the horse. Okay. And it's still snowing. They're in the telegraph office. And then what is the conflict, or what happens in the story? Um, and and this is the biggest issue. The biggest issue. What is she infuriated about? What does she get so upset about? Um, that's what you're looking for. And the conflict is usually revealed in the beginning, in the rising action, before you get to the climax, before you get to the falling action. Okay, so it's up here in the arc of the story before the climax. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Okay, and so if you're looking back in the story, that's how you're going to go about that. Okay, so do that, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to also go. We're going to stop there. We're going to stop there. All right. So make sure you do episode 3.